let's talk about what I wanted to hear about, which was what's happening at Ponton, because that's where all the action is. That's where you've been working hard since we last spoke. So why don't you give us a rundown of the challenge that you've got there and the sorts of things that you've been doing since we last spoke?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually come together quite nicely since we last spoke. That was a project that initially, when we did the deal with Barrick had inquired about including Ponton in the sort of the greater Pueblo Grande earn-in agreement. And because it's only about 25 kilometers away from Pueblo Grande and Barrick's Pueblo Viejo mining operation in the same geology. We elected to keep it. My technical team, my vice president of exploration, Michael Moore, really liked the project. In spite of the fact that we hadn't really done a lot of work with it ourselves, we inherited a data set from the previous operators that we hadn't really spent a lot of time looking at because we were very focused on the big prize next to Barrick. But when we were sort of forced with, do we want to keep this or make it part of the Barrick deal, we dug a little deeper and recognized, hey, there's a really compelling geochemical target here, gold in soil anomaly that's never been drilled. It's peripheral to a fairly interesting, what appears to be sort of a gold copper porphyry. All of this sort of speaks to what could be a pretty compelling epithermal system. And so we kept it ourselves. When we did the deal with Barrick, we of course got about a $1.4 million injection of capital from Barrick in the form of a private placement from Barrick. And so we were nicely cashed up with a couple of million, 2.5 million or so in the till at that time. And we set out to better understand this project and some of the prior work. As I said, we inherited some geochemical anomalies on the property package. But what our first phase of work was to go in, send crews in. And again, we were able to do this because of our sort of existing tenure in the Dominican Republic. In spite of the COVID restrictions, we had a good enough network of in-country geological expertise and field crews that we were able to send locals into the project. Again, a little bit later than we had initially expected because of early restrictions. And we conducted systematic geochemical soil. We basically collected soils over that Cope Hill zone, is what we call it within the property. And we expanded that anomaly. So there was already a fairly sizable, call it, a kilometer by half a kilometer gold anomaly in soils. We expanded that out a little bit to the north and northwest and tightened up the spacing. So where prior operators had collected soils every 50 meters, we collected soil samples every 25 meters to sort of really get a better density and understand the concentrations. And that has returned obviously some nice geochem in soils, but also along the way we collected some fairly compelling rock samples as well. And we were collecting rock samples, many high-grade samples, 7 grams per ton, 17 grams per ton, 53 grams per ton gold in rock samples. And all within sort of a fairly consistent concentrated area within the Cope Hill. And now, just as a bit of a sidebar, the Dominican Republic, in our experience, hasn't delivered a lot of that kind of surface mineralization. A lot of the projects and the targets that we've delineated, just based on the country's geology, has been a little bit more benign, and you sort of get these subtle anomalies. But in this case, to get these high-grade numbers was quite unusual. And so the next phase of work that we're just finalizing now is to run ground magnetics over that. And again, it's the same sequence of work that we conducted at other projects that's been successful. So get the geochem, get an idea where there's gold at surface, and then run ground magnetics or ground geophysics over that to see if you get some indication of what the geophysical signature might be. And so we're hoping to have those geophysical results in the coming weeks. And that, again, will give us an additional layer of data that we will utilize for drill targeting.
Okay, I mean, those rock samples are what people are excited about in the marketplace. I mean, let's say 53 grams is pretty punchy anywhere in the world, but it's just that. It's just a rock sample. So I get the geochem and the geophysics that you're running through. What at the end of that do you hope to know? What's the picture you're painting here, and what do you want to be able to go to the market and say about Ponton?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we've if you were to ask my geologist, even 6 months ago when we sort of shifted gears from Pueblo Grande to Ponton, I think that his words were, if put a gun to my head, I could drill this project tomorrow. I mean, it's compelling enough. It's a fairly straightforward model. In fact, one of my geologists on the board, Quentin Henning, sort of said early on in this project when some of this geochemical data came up, he said, "Look, this is a walk-up drill target. You don't have to over science this. This is pretty straightforward stuff." So we have a very concise and simple sort of geochemical anomaly and model. But what we like to do, and we've done this in the past with Wanda Herrera with target delineation and with Pueblo Grande, is to add layers of data that help us vector so that we know where within a broader anomaly, where do we actually want to put a drill hole and call it drills. And so for us, we see the characteristics of an epithermal gold system here early on. And if the geophysics sort of pan out and we get some magnetic lows coincidental with these rock samples and high grade concentrations of gold, that will be that sort of second layer of data that, again, vectors us to where we might actually set up a drill rig and poke some holes. So, the goal here is to get this drill ready in the coming months. I think, sometime in the next couple of months seems realistic to me. And it'll be a compilation of geochemical results, geophysical or magnetic results, and some mapping just to understand the geology. And we layer those three together and start to plot up a drill plan.